there's a lot less sort of direct sunlight. There's a lot more cloudiness, variability. And the other thing is that snow loads can sometimes wreak havoc on trackers. And just having to maintain the mechanical aspects of that are more difficult.
Next question.
I just wanted to, excuse me, see if you could follow up on the point about VCs having, an investment appetite for 5 to 7 years, and particularly, are there any models or opportunities for funds that have, longer, other opportunities for government to maybe guarantee return to some extent, or what's being done in other countries to facilitate, the 20 to 30 year cycles that you tend to need for clean tech?
I think there are a number of things happening. Some of them are done on the company side, like trying to survive as long as you can off of government money, so that by the time you take in traditional venture money, you are within 5 to 7 years from an exit potentially. But there are also other kind of investor profiles that I think may be in some ways more aligned with certain types of clean tech investments. I mentioned one of my clients, Black Coral Capital. Its source of capital is a very wealthy family office, and in fact they're beginning to co-invest with other billionaire family offices. And part of their value proposition is that they have no life of fund issues, so they often compete favorably in investments with really hot companies against traditional venture capitalists, because they can say, we're not going to put you on a 5-year timeline. And there are other investors in the space that meet that profile. Corporate strategic investors don't have this issue by and large as well, although they often co-invest. Both of these investor types often co-invest alongside traditional VCs, and so they can kind of pick up that problem vicariously if they're co-investing with traditional VCs who will tend to impose that time frame on everyone. I think we're going to see more and more, and it may be happening without my awareness already, and to the extent there are committed limited partners limited partners who are committed to clean tech, who are investing in specialist clean tech funds, see the life of fund issue actually adjusted for these funds, give them a longer life potentially.
Any other comments? No? Next question.
Okay, while we're back on the financing issues, it's great that we've got so many new manufacturers in the Hudson Valley in New York State concentrating on PV and solar thermal. But what this gentleman asked before about building integrated PV and all these new technologies, I guess, Peter, this is probably the best question for you. From a bankability perspective, I don't know what your experience is financing projects for developers and installations, but on those larger scale, once you start talking about those commercial installations and those larger utility scale projects, bankability is a very big project. How many years of maturity in a project or a product cycle typically will the capital find confidence in that product to finance its implementation?
I actually am a partner in a development company, so I have a lot of experience in this area. And we recently reviewed all the major PV manufacturers in the world's warranties, and they're worthless, except for one company. It's unbelievable, and no one seems to notice this. But we could have a real hiccup here, because aside from asphalt shingles, to the best of my knowledge, there's only PV panels are the only thing that sits in the environment for 25 years. It's unbelievable. And if it's building integrated, to the other gentleman's question, if it's vertical, you have a much better chance of it lasting 25 years. And I only know of one PV manufacturer in the world that has panels in the field, actually in the field for 20 years. And that happened to be a thin film company. But there's no crystalline panels in the field for very many years. And this bankability thing is a real problem. We've talked to a number of financial sources. We're trying to put together a very creative way of financing these projects. And every single financing source said to us, hopefully you're not using Chinese panels, because we will not finance them.
So when you say worthless, do you mean that you can't borrow against it, or that the company can't?
They're worthless. They're totally worthless. There's nothing in the warranty that will allow you to get any satisfaction if the product doesn't work.
Peter, there are performance guarantees backed up by insurance companies, so the insurance company is the recourse. Now, Peter, you know that to be the case. I agree with you that this business has matured so quickly that there are not real-time examples of 20 and 25-year service. But I also know that the reinsurers, Munich Re in particular, Swiss Re also, have put money into the hands of the carriers, and the carriers have entered into legally binding contracts to pay if the performance isn't there. So I hugely respect what you know about the business, but let's take things in perspective. We have a manufacturer right down the road in Ulster County that has the panel that Underwriters Laboratory, surely as respectful as thee and me, has done an accelerated burn, and they have had remarkably little diminution in performance over a 20-year accelerated burn. So let's just put those things into play in our discussion, because I have such respect for you. If I didn't know otherwise, if you said that all these performance guarantees are utterly worthless, I would just take that at face value. So let's balance the discussion by saying that in your opinion, bankability is still in question. I will tell you what you know and the room ought to know. There are only a dozen or so modules that in terms of banking large projects will be accepted by the funders. But that doesn't mean that we can reasonably project that today's high-quality module, I'm not talking about schlocky modules that are being sold at $1.20 per watt, CIF contained in freight, I would take them as a gift. But this is not to say that high-quality modules made by reputable manufacturers that have performance guarantees backed up by funders are not producing for people today. You know?
I think it's, Peter raises an interesting point about China. That, I mean, this sounds to me like an opportunity for the higher quality product. That the insurers probably are going to be looking for recourse if they're going to underwrite a project. And if the Chinese manufacturer doesn't provide that, then...
Right, and also, I'm not disagreeing with you, but if you look at the warranty carefully, and you have lawyers look at it, which is different than when normal people look at it, the performance guarantee is totally nebulous. And if you have 5,000 panels on your roof, I own a building with 5,000 panels on it, and one of them wasn't working, that's because a tree hit it. So if you're not monitoring those panels, at least on a string level, you have no idea whether it's performing or not.
I completely agree.
And that's a real problem.
You and I are not butting heads. I'm just saying.
No, I know we're not.
It's not a question of black and white, and everything is completely black because it's all nonsense about these performance guarantees. I agree with you that many warranties are on the face of them worthless.
This sounds like a great topic to discuss over a glass of wine.
Oh, yeah.
And then, so I'm just going to have two quick questions, and then we're going to close this up and have a reception outside.
Actually, Peter brought up China, and that relates to my question. With the recent prices we see out of China, the solar industry basically says, you know, that their product isn't good, but if they get UL listing, there's not a real on-paper differentiation. How can U.S. and New York module industry survive these low-cost modules coming on the market. I've seen some companies not make it and pull back on plans. And how can we make sure that we keep our industry, our technology, our innovation strong through this low cost, and it may be from a suppressed currency value, not really related to what it costs to make the product. But how can we deal with this challenge?
Great question. Anyone?
I think that when you go head to head with them, you're going to lose. So we have to use, what we have. Witness this facility. It's technological innovation, and we need disruptive technologies because you're not going to compete with them on price.
And I would also add maybe integrating the supply chain into a tighter, and then dealing with interoperability, the total solution, not just a product.
If you notice, almost all the large public solar companies are buying the entire chain so they can capture margin at each step.
Yeah.
That's how the margins, if you've noticed the last quarter, they all had increased margins.
And also drive standards.
And that's how.
That's another, I think, aspect. It's standards in the size of the cell, all that. One last question.
Germany's been very successful in developing a PV market, and it's not just users. They're at a very high percentage. They now pretty much are going to get close to a point where they can stabilize their energy prices for a very long period of time. And they're developing a lot of manufacturing. And it was all basically driven by a feed-in tariff. And as opposed to all these other methods we do here, we have grant programs and stuff like that, the feed-in tariff basically puts the onus on the person. Do I want to get 50 cents, a kilowatt hour? And I take my risk, and I'm going to go out and find the best person I can to install that, look for the best product, to ensure I get a quick payback. I wonder if the panel could comment on the validity of a feed-in tariff approach to the market here as opposed to what we're doing now. I got to quickly say, we do a lot of institutional buildings, and our cost of capital is very low. And institutional buildings in New York City are governed by the Power Authority. We talk about 7.5 cents a kilowatt hour peak, 3.5 off peak. Now there are some hefty demand charges, but it is extremely difficult, to drive any market with those kind of numbers. There are programs, if I turn the thing that rotates on and sheds some load, but a natural load shedder, there aren't really equivalent type dollars available for that. And so in my view, I think something has to be looked at, for the when PV's putting out power, it's not getting its true value for what it's offsetting. And the current price rate structures just do not address that. So the feed-in tariff, I think, is one approach that involves more national policy, but
there are people on the panel more knowledgeable about this than I am, but just anecdotally, I mean, I think a couple things about feed-in tariffs. One is they can certainly be taken to excess, from a national policy perspective, witness Spain, but it is kind of hard to argue with the success of, Germany and certain provinces in Canada and whatnot. And anecdotally, I know a couple investors on the developer side who've essentially chased tariffs around the world and would really like to be active in the U.S., but they just can't make their models work here. And so the feed-in tariffs have been the most attractive incentive to to this sort of investor. There are a lot of different ways to come at that, but that's a model that's pretty, at least on the capital side, has had a lot of attractive pull.
I think this is a question for the Jets.